till 10:30. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We were in a prison, Dana and I were doing a ministry, and I was teaching on healing because these guys had all get baptized in the Holy Spirit. They were all changed and they were hungry to do more. So they wanted to know more about healing. So I was spending our 2.5 hours with the question and answers and going through scriptures on healing. And this old guy, I don't know how old he was, but he'd been in prison his whole life for some nasty homicides he had done as a young man. And he would come to the services, but he would never say a word. He would just come and he would sit there and he just do anything he could to get out of his cell. So he's there and he comes every time we're there. And so while I'm praying, while I'm teaching on healing, the guy just falls over dead, falls to the floor. I mean, and I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, oh, it's a medical deal. And one of the inmates comes up and he goes, he's dead. And so I go to the door, and I finally get the guard's attention because there's no guard in the room. We're in there by ourselves and they're in across the hallway in another room. So I'm waving, I finally get their attention. That takes me like 10 minutes, So one of them comes to the door and opens it and to listen to me. And I go, there's a guy fell over dead in here. And he just goes, okay, closes the door. So it's another 20 minutes before the medical team gets there. Now the guys have gathered around him, praying over him, I've spoke over him, but there's nothing. He's gone. And so the medical staff comes in, they check him, and there's no pulse. They grab him by the arms and the legs and drop him on a gurney, cover him up, roll out, not saying a word. They're not in a hurry because he's dead. When they leave, these guys just kneel. Why didn't God raise him from the dead? Why is he not, why didn't this happen? Why didn't, and they're going, we've been praying for this guy. You don't understand. He doesn't know Jesus. And we've been praying for him to receive Jesus. And it's not right for him to die before he gets to receive Jesus. I'm going, what am I going to say? It's just like, I just preached on this stuff and then this happens and it's like, there is no power in the room. So I'm trying to answer their questions, but they're all mad. They're going, well, how do we believe in healing when this guy just fell over dead that we've been praying for? So I'm at a loss for words. Don't have anything to say. All of a sudden, the door opens and in walks this old guy, followed by the warden, followed by the captain of the guards, followed by the assistant warden, followed by the medical team. They all follow this guy in. He walks in with the biggest smile on his face and turns around and sits down in his chair, never says a word. So I've got all of the head people are there. So we just go right ahead and finish talking about healing. I never make a big deal about it. Everybody's just sitting there with their mouths open because this guy's back. And it's been like an hour and a half since he died. And so close the service, leave. The chaplain is following me. The warden is following Dana and I out. I don't remember what questions they asked, but they didn't know what to ask. They had no clue. So 2 weeks later, we come back, and or a month later, and when we come back, the guys go, he died. And I go, what? Yeah, he said, we led him to the Lord, and a couple of days later, he died. And they were all excited that God had raised him from the dead so that he could receive salvation, so that he could go home. Oh, it was quite a deal. I mean, our ministry there really changed.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, the chaplain was Seventh-day Adventist, and he wanted us out. From that point on, he did everything he could to get us kicked out.
Ah.
He even planted a guy in the service who went and hid in the music instruments room when we were closing down the chapel. We have to check it and make sure everybody's out and then lock the doors. So he had this guy and staged this so that this guy would be left and then he was going to kick us out. So he did. He says, you left the room and there was one man still left in the chapel, and therefore we're suspending your service. You can no longer minister here. The inmates raised such a ruckus over it that he finally had to call and change that and say, okay, he says, this is a disciplinary action that is going to happen. It'll be for 7 days more, and then you can come back in and do your service. But the guys gave us the rest of the story when we got back in of how he wasn't going to let us back ever.
Wow.
He didn't want us in there, and they had demanded they have a right to have, and I was willing to come and do a Pentecostal service. Well, nobody else did one in there. There was just like one other group, and they really didn't do Pentecostal services. They just did praise and worship all the time. So he had to let us back in. It just made him so mad. He just couldn't handle it. And our services were packed. We saw revival in the prison. We saw guys confess sins, crimes that they hadn't never told anybody they'd done. It was incredible. So that's the story.
Yeah, thanks. That's great.
Yeah.
Nothing.